Remember when gardens weren't just hobbies but necessities? Your grandparents didn't have the luxury of giving up on a patch of lifeless dirt. They knew secrets to transform even the most barren soil into a thriving garden that fed families year after year. Today, I'm sharing 20 forgotten techniques that brought dead soil back to life, methods that worked without expensive store-bought products or fancy equipment. These time-tested approaches might just be what your struggling garden needs. The Compost Pit Method. Long before plastic compost bins became popular, your grandparents dug strategic pits throughout their gardens. They'd excavate a hole about 2 to 3 feet deep, fill it with kitchen scraps, garden waste, and even small amounts of paper, then cover it with soil. As these materials broke down, they created pockets of incredible fertility. The genius part? They'd plant directly on top of these spots the following season. Tomatoes, squash, and corn thrived in these nutrient-rich zones. This wasn't just convenient, it targeted fertility exactly where plants needed it most, while recycling what would otherwise be waste. Next time you're preparing a bed for hungry feeders like tomatoes, try digging a pit first. Your plants will thank you with abundant harvests. Cover cropping. Before synthetic fertilizers existed, your grandparents relied on nature's nitrogen factories, legumes. Field beans were the winter workhorse in many old gardens. These hardy plants could be sown even in late fall, growing slowly through winter before exploding with growth in early spring. Their deep roots broke up compacted soil, while special nodules on their roots captured nitrogen from the air. The key was timing. They'd cut these plants down before flowering, leaving the roots in place and using the tops as mulch or compost. This practice added both nitrogen and organic matter to depleted soil. One old farmer's saying captures it perfectly. Beans in winter mean bounty in summer. A single season of field beans could transform gray, lifeless soil into rich, crumbly earth ready for planting. Biochar Creation. Some of your grandparents, particularly those with farming backgrounds, practiced a form of soil building that dates back thousands of years, creating biochar. They'd burn woody materials in a low-oxygen environment, often in a pit covered with soil, creating charcoal that was then crushed and worked into garden beds. This charcoal, unlike ash, didn't break down quickly, but instead created permanent structure in the soil. Its honeycomb-like surface provided habitat for beneficial microbes and held both water and nutrients. Gardens treated with biochar showed improved fertility for decades, not just seasons. This ancient practice, rediscovered in the Amazon's incredibly fertile terra preta soils, is now being scientifically validated as one of the most effective long-term soil amendments available. Leaf mold magic. Those fallen autumn leaves that blanket yards weren't waste to your grandparents, they were future garden gold. They'd gather leaves into simple wire enclosures or piles, letting them decompose for 1 to 2 years until they transformed into dark, crumbly leaf mold. This material was garden magic, improving soil structure, water retention, and microbial activity when mixed into depleted soil. Unlike raw compost, leaf mold could be used anywhere without risk of burning plants. It was particularly prized for starting seeds and rejuvenating flower beds. The patience required for this process has been forgotten in our instant gratification world, but the results are worth the wait. Modern gardeners can start this process with this fall's leaves, creating a free soil amendment that outperforms many store-bought products. Manure Tea Brewing. Long before liquid fertilizers lined garden center shelves, your grandparents brewed their own plant food. They'd fill burlap sacks with animal manure, usually cow or horse, then suspend these tea bags in barrels of water. After steeping for days or weeks, the resulting dark liquid contained readily available nutrients that could be poured directly around plants. This gentle feeding method prevented the burning that raw manure can cause while delivering nutrients in a form plants could immediately use. The liquid could be diluted for regular feeding or used full strength for heavy feeders like corn and tomatoes. This practice transformed a potential waste product into a valuable resource while providing plants with balanced nutrition that built soil health over time. Hügelkultur Mounds. In areas with poor soil, your grandparents sometimes built growing mounds using a technique we now call hügelkultur. They'd start with logs and branches as a base, then layer on smaller woody materials, compost, manure, and finally soil. These mounds created perfect growing conditions even in areas with heavy clay or rocky ground. As the wood slowly decomposed, it released nutrients, retained moisture like a sponge, and created air pockets for healthy roots. These mounds actually improved year after year as the materials broke down. The technique turned problematic materials like fallen branches into assets rather than waste. For modern gardeners dealing with challenging soil conditions, this old technique offers a way to grow abundant food without waiting years for soil improvement. The stink bucket fertilizer. Not for the faint of heart, the infamous stink bucket was a staple behind many garden sheds. Grandma would fill a bucket with water and add nitrogen-rich materials like comfrey leaves, nettles, or even fish scraps. After fermenting for weeks, hence the name, this potent liquid was strained and diluted before being applied to plants. The smell was legendary, but so were the results. Plants responded with explosive growth after application. This homemade brew contained a complete spectrum of nutrients that commercial fertilizers often lack. While modern gardeners might hold their noses, they can't argue with the effectiveness of this free, sustainable plant food. Today, you can make a less offensive version using comfrey leaves and rainwater in a covered bucket. Just remember to dilute it before use. Trench composting. For crops planted in rows like beans or corn, your grandparents often employed trench composting. In fall or early spring, they'd dig trenches about a foot deep where rows would later go. These trenches were filled with layers of leaves, kitchen scraps, and thin layers of soil. By planting time, this material had partially decomposed, creating the perfect growing environment. Plants sent roots directly into this rich organic matter, accessing nutrients exactly when needed. This method was particularly effective for heavy feeders like corn, which thrived on the slow-release nutrition. The beauty of trench composting is that it works with nature's decomposition timeline, releasing nutrients gradually throughout the growing season rather than all at once, like many modern fertilizers. Worm farming in sunken beds. Your grandparents understood that earthworms were the ultimate soil builders. In areas with poor soil, they'd often create sunken beds, garden areas dug slightly below grade, where they'd concentrate organic materials to attract and feed earthworms. Coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, and vegetable scraps were buried in these areas, creating ideal worm habitat. As the worm population exploded, their castings enriched the soil while their tunneling improved drainage and aeration. This deliberate worm farming transformed poor soil into rich garden loam within a few seasons. The slightly sunken nature of these beds also helped retain moisture in drier climates. Modern soil science has confirmed what gardeners have known for generations. Worm castings contain plant growth hormones and beneficial bacteria that stimulate plant growth beyond just their nutrient content. Green manure crops. Your grandparents understood that soil needs rest and rejuvenation. Instead of leaving garden beds bare during off-seasons, they planted specific crops meant to be turned back into the soil. Green manures. Fast-growing plants like buckwheat in summer or winter rye in colder months would be grown until just before flowering, then turned under. As these plants decomposed, they added organic matter, improved soil structure, and suppressed weeds. Buckwheat was especially valued for making phosphorus more available to future crops. This practice mimicked nature's way of building soil in forests and prairies. The saying, "Rest the soil, not the garden," captured this philosophy perfectly. Modern gardeners can adopt this technique by dedicating even small sections of their garden to green manures in rotation. Comfrey, the dynamic accumulator. Your grandparents likely had a patch of comfrey growing somewhere in their garden, not by accident, but as a living soil amendment. This perennial plant sends roots down 6 to 10 feet, mining minerals and nutrients from deep subsoil layers inaccessible to other plants. They'd harvest the large leaves several times per season, using them as mulch around fruit trees, in compost piles, or steeped in water as a potent liquid fertilizer. Comfrey leaves decompose quickly, releasing their stored nutrients and feeding the soil food web. Once established, a small comfrey patch could provide free fertilizer for decades. Modern soil tests have confirmed what your grandparents knew through observation. Comfrey leaves contain higher concentrations of potassium, phosphorus, and calcium than most commercial organic fertilizers. Wood ash application. That pile of ashes from the wood stove wasn't trash to your grandparents, it was garden gold. Wood ash contains potassium, calcium, and other minerals that plants crave. The application was an art form, though. They'd sprinkle a thin layer around fruit trees and bushes in late winter, or dust it lightly over garden beds before spring planting. The key was moderation. Too much could alter soil pH dramatically. This free resource helped fruit set, strengthened plant stems, and improved overall vigor in gardens where buying fertilizer wasn't always an option. The practice connected home heating directly to food production in a beautiful cycle of sustainability. For modern gardeners, this means saving those fireplace ashes in metal buckets, once completely cool, for spring application. Just keep it away from acid-loving plants like blueberries. Crop rotation discipline. Your grandparents didn't just plant randomly, they followed strict crop rotation schedules that maintained soil health. They knew that growing the same crop in the same spot depleted specific nutrients while potentially building up pests and diseases. By rotating plant families through different garden sections over 3 to 4 years, they naturally balanced soil nutrients and broke pest cycles. Heavy feeders like corn would be followed by soil builders like beans, then light feeders like root vegetables. This systematic approach meant no part of the garden was ever completely depleted. The discipline required for proper rotation has largely been lost in modern gardening, but it remains one of the most effective ways to maintain soil health without external inputs. Companion planting wisdom. Before chemical solutions, your grandparents relied on strategic plant combinations to improve soil health. They knew certain plants benefited others when grown together. Marigolds weren't just for show. Their roots released compounds that deterred harmful nematodes. Deep-rooted comfrey brought up minerals from subsoil layers. Clover between rows fixed nitrogen while suppressing weeds. These plant partnerships created a balanced garden ecosystem that built soil health naturally. This wasn't superstition, but generations of careful observation. The practice recognized that plants, like people, thrive in community rather than isolation. Today's gardeners are rediscovering these plant relationships, finding that the right combinations can eliminate the need for many modern interventions while gradually improving even the poorest soil. Chicken tractors. Long before chicken tractors became trendy, your grandparents were using chickens to prepare garden beds. They'd construct simple, movable pens without floors, placing them over areas with poor soil. The chickens would scratch, eat weeds and insects, and deposit manure for several weeks before the pen was moved to a new location. This process cleared land while simultaneously fertilizing it. The chicken's natural scratching behavior worked organic matter into the top few inches of soil, creating perfect planting conditions. This symbiotic relationship turned the chicken's natural behaviors into a soil-building asset. For modern gardeners with both chickens and gardens, this technique creates a direct connection between raising animals and growing food while building soil fertility naturally. Newspaper and cardboard mulching. Your grandparents were recycling long before it was fashionable, using newspapers and cardboard to smother weeds and build soil. They'd lay down thick layers of paper, wet it thoroughly, then cover with organic materials like grass clippings, leaves, or straw. This created a weed-free planting area while adding organic matter as the paper decomposed. The technique was particularly useful for converting lawn into garden beds without the back-breaking work of digging out sod. Earthworms were attracted to the moist environment under the paper, further improving soil structure. This method mimicked the natural layering of organic materials in forests, where leaves and branches create new soil over time. Modern gardeners can still use this technique, though it's wise to avoid glossy colored paper which may contain heavy metals. Alfalfa, the soil builder. In areas with truly depleted soil, your grandparents might have planted alfalfa as a restorative crop. With roots that can extend 15 to 30 feet deep, alfalfa brought up minerals from far below the topsoil while fixing nitrogen from the air. They'd grow it for 1 to 3 years before turning it under to create new garden beds. The massive root system improved soil structure dramatically, creating channels for water and air penetration. When finally incorporated into the soil, these roots added substantial organic matter. This patience-requiring approach could transform even the most depleted land into productive garden soil. For modern gardeners with the luxury of space and time, dedicating a portion of the garden to alfalfa rotation can rejuvenate soil without chemicals or purchased amendments. Deep mulching. Your grandparents understood the transformative power of deep mulching to bring lifeless soil back from the dead. They'd layer 4 to 6 inches of organic materials, straw, leaves, grass clippings, or even pine needles, over barren areas. This thick blanket did more than just suppress weeds. It created a perfect environment for soil regeneration. As the mulch slowly decomposed, it fed earthworms and beneficial microbes that returned to the previously dead soil. The mulch also regulated soil temperature and moisture, preventing the extreme conditions that kill soil life. Within a single season, areas that were once hard, cracked clay, or lifeless sand would begin showing signs of life. This passive approach required minimal effort, but delivered remarkable results. Modern gardeners facing truly dead soil can still use this technique, essentially letting nature do the hard work of soil restoration while they simply provide the raw materials. The Three Sisters Method. Indigenous wisdom influenced many of your grandparents' gardening practices, particularly the Three Sisters Method of planting corn, beans, and squash together. This wasn't just space efficient, it actually built soil health. Corn provided structure for beans to climb. Beans fixed nitrogen that fed the corn and squash, while squash leaves shaded the soil, preventing weed growth and water evaporation. This plant community created its own microclimate and soil building system. Gardens using this method showed improved soil structure and fertility year after year, even without additional amendments. The Three Sisters approach recognized that plant communities, rather than monocultures, build the healthiest soil systems. Modern gardeners rediscovering this technique find it particularly effective for converting poor soil into productive garden space with minimal external inputs. Wool mulching. In sheep-raising regions, your grandparents might have used raw wool as a soil amendment and mulch. Wool contains high levels of nitrogen that release slowly as it decomposes, feeding plants for an entire season or longer. They'd place wool around fruit trees between vegetable rows or work it directly into soil that needed rejuvenation. As it broke down, wool improved soil structure while adding nutrients. It also retained moisture exceptionally well, reducing watering needs. This practice connected animal husbandry directly to gardening in a sustainable cycle. Modern gardeners can still source raw wool from local farms, often for free, as lower-grade wool has little commercial value but works perfectly in the garden. Our grandparents knew that healthy soil wasn't purchased in bags. It was built through observation, patience, and working with nature rather than against it. So which of these forgotten soil-building techniques will you try in your garden this season? If you found these old-time methods helpful, hit subscribe for more traditional wisdom that's more relevant today than ever.